Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. So in light of some of the critical feedback I received on my last video about the Fort McMurray wildfires, I want to provide some clarification of my perspective about what climate change is, because depending on who you are and what you're referencing, you may have a different definition for what you mean by that terminology. So I want to clarify, in my opinion, what I believe climate change is and what it isn't, and highlight some of the reasons why I think as preppers and survivalists we need to prepare, not necessarily for climate change, but for the consequences of mankind's collective impact on our environment. Now, we need to distinguish between climate change and man's influence on the environment. This is probably one of the biggest points of miscommunication of all the contentious issues in the 21st century. I want to first send my condolences to the victims and families of the Fort McMurray wildfires that are still raging on today. It's a disaster of epic proportions. It's Canada's equivalent of Hurricane Katrina. And while I can strongly empathize with the material loss that these families have suffered, I also know that in times of grief, loss, and despair comes spiritual growth and wisdom. So I'm at once both saddened by their physical losses, but also envious of the lessons they learned, especially with regards to emergency preparedness. I plan on doing a video in the future that talks about the lessons that can be learned from Fort McMurray once the survivors of that disaster have settled, which may be some time, and some of them might be willing to tell us a bit about the psychological experience of losing it all. Because in an instant, we can lose it all, and you need to be prepared to lose everything when you're a prepper. That's probably one of the hardest things to prep for, is the fact that you may well be left with nothing but yourself and your bug out bag. That all of the provisions that you've stored over the years could at any time be wiped off the face of the earth. So my heart goes out to the Fort Mac residents. I don't doubt that they will be taken care of. Canada, by and large, is a prosperous country who has come together to support these people in a time of need. Now, for the topic of the day, I want to first say that if you don't know me that well, I encourage you to go back, watch my video called The War on Self-Reliance, Why Society Fear Preppers. I've made a couple videos that thoroughly document my attitudes towards big government and big corporations, for that matter. To me, they're one and the same thing. If you're on the right, you fear big government. If you're on the left, you fear big corporations. The fact is, at the end of the day, they're run by the same damn people, which is why I don't do politics. I'm fully aware of the fact that every legislation and regulation that seeks to sell me back my own God-given human rights, that the corresponding security it provides me, the freedoms it also takes away. Now, in terms of the global warming debate, I'm not going to take any sides on that particular issue. I still think the jury's out on that. Some people are convinced it's one way, some people are convinced it's the other way. But I just want to say that I'm very agnostic about the issue. I can't say it's one way or the other with any degree of absolution. I've been exposed to the exact same documentaries, data, books, articles that you have about it. So it's not that I haven't been exposed to the information. I just think this day and age it's very hard to make any sort of absolute statements about an issue like this, because not only do you have conflicting science, but you also have the media, which can be manipulated by both sides of the argument. So right off the bat, I know some one-dimensionally minded people are going to immediately assume that I'm of the climate change party, and they're going to pigeonhole me into that group without even hearing what I have to say, without being open-minded, without approaching this idea like an adult in a rational state of mind, understanding that we don't know it all. Because if you think you know it all, you just stop thinking. I get that there can be special interests who benefit from carbon taxes and from regulating the oil industry, from making sure that you consume less. I understand that. But on the flip side of that, there's special interests that benefit from oil. There's special interest all around. In the end, I guarantee you that the carbon traders and the oil traders, they're probably all on the same team. Special interests are on both sides of the argument. So if you're worried about some secretive global agenda to take away your rights while profiting, concentrating power in the hands of a few, be worried about both perspectives and the consequences of both. That is, the consequences of fully buying into the climate change argument and going full-on reversion to bicycles and horse and plow and, getting rid of all the cows because they're polluting the atmosphere with their methane. Or go the route of drill baby drill, get the biggest, baddest, gas-guzzling truck that you can possibly imagine, consume as much as you possibly can. Either way, those who you suspect want to take away your rights will prosper. So that any solutions proposed that proclaim to be for the sake of mankind as a whole likely will come with many strings attached and will likely not only entail the erosion of our civil rights and liberties, but also aggressive taxation. But this is not to say, however, that our collective impact on our habitat is insignificant. This just means that we're damned if we do, and we're damned if we don't. So it's not a question of me being some green-eyed, naive progressive who doesn't understand how government works and doesn't understand how government can be bought and all of that. That has nothing to do with my views on man's impact on the environment. I, as much as you other skeptics out there, know full well that any crisis, be it ecological or otherwise, will be exploited by the powers that be for primarily the gain of a few over the many. Now, we need to distinguish between climate change and man's influence on the environment. This is probably one of the biggest points of miscommunication of all the contentious issues in the 21st century. People need to stop referring to climate change. People need to just stop using that word, but people need to stop referring to it as man's collective impact on the environment. Climate change, as it's commonly understood, for most people is representative of the temperature fluctuations on the planet. So either you believe that the climate's changing to an ice age, or you believe we're going to fry like chickens and wither into dust. That's typically 90% of the time when people talk about climate change, it's about global warming. Yet we have a lot of people lumping all of man's collective influence on the environment into that category, which is totally flawed in its semantics. Now, while a few people may more generally refer to climate change as man's collective environmental impact, you may be arguing with somebody who doesn't. And then it's a useless argument because you're both arguing about something entirely different. The toxic waterways, the fishing, the overtrawling, the overfishing, the depleted fish stocks, the bioamplification of toxins within certain animals, topsoil erosion, GMOs, pesticides, insecticides, oil spills, deforestation, pollution, lowered sperm counts, all of the pharmaceuticals draining into our waterways, factory farming, monoculture, superbugs, people living on the fringes, Fukushima, nuclear reactors, breakdown, war. There are so many environmental impacts that mankind is having right now that do not include the diversion that is the global warming debate. So if you cannot understand how we are infecting the environment and you're not preparing for the outcomes of that, and you just think it's all hogwash because of you lump it all together with global warming, then my friend, you are mistaken. There indeed needs to be a line drawn between those two things, because where there indeed is debate to be had about the global warming issue, the other issues that I just mentioned, and many more for that matter that I can't think of off the top of my head, but are surely factors in our demise, are going to be an issue, and you need to prepare for these things. Lots of the effects of the aforementioned are cumulative. I think Alex Jones, and I don't like quoting Alex Jones, quite frankly, I'm not a big Alex Jones fan, but I like the word that I believe it was him who coined it. Might have been Bill Cooper, one of those conspiracy guys, but it was soft kill. And you don't have to get into the whole chemtrail thing to even talk about the soft kill aspect of modern civilization. We're doing it to ourselves. whether it's with what we eat or how we treat ourselves, the various industrial complexes which are hoisted up on this superficial economy that we've come to depend on, the idea that you're only going to get a grant to do research if you're testing a theory put forth by the person who's sponsoring that research. So you're inevitably pointed in that direction. So indeed, if 99 of the academics are telling me that global warming is man-made and that that's what I should focus on, and never mind the dozens of other issues that I just talked about who are plain as day, that we should once focus on this dubious issue because it was commissioned by some government agency to validate, then that's a failure of my own judgment, and we're going to reap the consequences of that. So the point I'm trying to make in this video is that you can have ecological collapse without necessarily having global warming, or as it's commonly referred to as climate change. So in many ways, it's kind of like a straw man argument that many in the anti-ecology crowd have no problem with debunking. However, we tend to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, when we extrapolate that argument to every instance where man is influencing the environment. So it tends to take the form of, well, global warming isn't real, therefore any impact that man has on the environment is not real. And I need to say outright, it's not so much the environment that needs saving, rather it's our habitat that needs saving. Because without our habitat, we cannot exist. So this is not a misanthropic argument, rather it's ado with the preservation of the human race. Now I beseech anybody who thinks that man doesn't have an impact on the environment, or if you think that our footprint is menial, I want you to go to the nearest body of water that you can find that's closest to your home, and I want you to go and get a cup, and I want you to drink that water. And if you can drink that water and not get sick, and you can do that on a regular basis, then you, my friend, are not a hypocrite, and by all means you can maintain that position you have with integrity, knowing that you're living the life that you're proclaiming we all should be entitled to live. If on the other hand you get sick and die, well, you will be missed. Now if again you decide that, okay, you're right, I can't drink the water because the water's too polluted because of human influence, then clearly you can relate to the idea that human beings have some sort of impact that will influence us negatively in the future. This is not to say I'm some kind of advocate of the NWO depopulation agenda, that we need to bring in a one-child policy and everybody has to go back to horse and carriage. I mean, just because I'm trying to take a mediating approach to this doesn't mean that I'm automatically on the opposite side of you. You know, some days I go outside and I see the wind blowing and I see the green grass blowing in the breeze and I think, you know what? It's all hype. It's all nonsense. But I'm having fewer and fewer of those moments as time goes on. Because I'm always back and forth with this stuff. I never set myself in one position. I don't box myself into any labels or ideas. I choose to keep an open mind. Because in this postmodern day and age where there is no truth to be had, where it's everybody spouting their beliefs as if it's a fact, as if it's truth, you have to have an open mind if you consider yourself a rational, independent thinker. A true independent cannot be defined and cannot be boxed into any ideology, religion, politic. And you may disagree, and for that I am grateful that you disagree. I am grateful that not everybody agrees with me. In fact, if everybody agreed with me, I would start to question my own beliefs. So I'd ask you all, when talking about this climate change thing, you need to separate the fact from the fiction. The facts are, we're definitely having an impact on the environment, because if we weren't, you would be down there scooping water out of the creek to drink and wash yourself with, but you're not. On the flip side of that coin, this whole global warming business, if it is true, then you better brace yourself. If it isn't, that still doesn't nullify all the things I just talked about. So I really hope that I've been able to lay out my perspective on this issue for you guys. It was plain as day this time. I don't think it can be misinterpreted at all, but undoubtedly for the people who only watched the first 2 minutes of the video, it most likely will be. For the rest of you, my friends, who already know me and know me well. I appreciate your support. And I know I've let my opinions seep into the channel as of late a bit more than I have in the past. But I guarantee you there's a lot of practical preparedness stuff coming up on this channel. I have so many videos that I have on the conveyor belt here. I just simply don't have the time to get them off, and I'm constantly sidetracked by these spontaneous videos like this. But I do think that it's important that I get these things off my chest so it doesn't build up and I take it out on my critics. I should also add that I'm on a diet right now, so I do have a bit of carb deprivation going on, which is making me a bit more uninhibited, I should say. And there's pros and cons to that, no doubt. But anyways, I'm just rambling now, so I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Stay tuned for a lot more great stuff this summer. And once again, I will ask that you support the Fort Mac refugees in any possible way you can, whether it's just with prayer or materially, through the various means to do that. You can do it through the Red Cross. Everybody knows that, although some people are skeptical of how much money actually gets sent to them. But I think by and large, just keep them in your thoughts and try to learn from their mistakes, but also learn from the things they did right. And what they did right was they kept their cool. And you know, I'm going to do a whole video about all of that at some point down the road here, so stick around for that. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out.
Check out the Canadian Preppers Network blog, an excellent resource for survivalists and preppers.